That's a great point. Often those sorts of troubles come in when we're shallow, right? And our roots aren't deep enough to really gather the strength where we should. Yeah, good. Anybody else? Braden?
Everybody has a microphone, and you can listen to. It's just ironic. Allie sent me a video the other day, and I happened to be scrolling, and I saw somebody reacting to that video, having a vastly different perception of it. It's like, we just can consume so much that if we aren't rooted appropriately, we can be so easily shaken and discouraged. Yep. Because it's like, why are all these people, why can't they just get it? We're all like claiming Jesus, but we can't get along. And if we don't understand some of the intricacies and stuff like that, it can be rather discouraging to be exposed to all of that and damaging.
Yeah, and again, if your roots aren't deep, it can be very confusing too, to have all these people out here who are reading the same words but having very different ideas about what it means. If we don't dig in deep enough to know, yeah, it can very easily pull us in a direction we don't need to go.
I've seen it happen where people are very enthusiastic, and they believe like 99 things out of 100, but
yeah.
one thing they don't quite understand, they can't grasp it perfectly, so they let it derail everything.
Yes. It's almost like that's their soapbox, and they want to get up and proclaim it. And if you don't believe with them on this thing, none of the other things matter. Yeah, and they're willing to let everything else go. Yeah, great point. I've seen that far too often. Yeah.
Do you have an example of that?
I do. So when I was, 8 or 10 maybe, we were going to a church who the eldership, I think there were 2 of them. One believed the scriptural point of marriage, divorce, and remarriage. One of them believed you could get divorced for any reason and then get married for any reason afterwards. And believed everything else, as far as I know. Granted, I was 8, right? So I only remember what I was told. But that became the point of a vast split in the church, where all those relationships were sundered because of this one topic. And granted, that's a big topic. It doesn't have to be that big, but it can be. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next part of this. So the thorns. The thorns here, verse 22, they receive the seed, they hear the word, the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and they become unfruitful. So what sorts of troubles do we encounter sometimes in the world? This is a little more specific than this, that can choke us out, choke out our zeal.
Mortgage is pretty expensive.
Okay.
There's lots of things about what we consider just a normal life, a normal single family home, whatever, to keep up. There's a lot to keep up with that goes with that. Starting a family, kids come in and you have to juggle all of that, and then if you throw in this, right, it's very easy for you to not really fully count the cost of what Jesus is asking us to do.
Yeah.
Right? If we don't sell out to Him completely, those other things are going to end up having a higher priority, despite our best intentions at first.
Yep.
It's kind of inevitable because they're right here and demanding your attention right now, right? So
It can be.
It's really easy to let them become the thing that chokes you out.
Yeah, it can be very easy to think of eternity as something that can wait. I got to deal with this thing now. Mortgages due now. Food bills are due now. We got to deal with those things, but not at the expense of eternity. Yeah, great.
I think when we think of 9/11, people still young, but after that was
Young Adults Class Kindle.
I remember it very clearly, but keep going. That's
that was like one of the most devastating days in American history. You see the next couple weeks,
Yeah.
all the churches were filled, and I can see this being the worries and treasures choking out people. Yes, they get too caught
Yeah. Yeah. It's very easy to look at the state of the world, regardless of any time, not just now, but at any point in history, there's always something happening. Tragedy, conflict, political turmoil, depressions, recessions, however you want to look at it. And to think, oh, this is the worst point in history. Maybe. Probably not. Right? There's always something else around the bend. God's consistent. He's steadfast, immovable. And our faith should always be abounding in him, regardless of what the circumstances are. Yeah.
Maybe more with the rock than the thorn, but it kind of applies across. More and more people claim to be agnostic, atheists, things like that, but they also then turn around and want to tell us how to live like a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus taught this, and it's a twisted manipulation to make you see things from their perspective. And it's so interesting because they don't even believe it, but they try to twist it to make us conform to a certain path. And I think that's especially popular in politics. But however we're involved with all of that, it's like when our standard becomes, and the noise is, this is what Christians are supposed to look like, this is what you're supposed to do, all of that, it can be really easy, whether this is rocks or thorns, to just, okay, that's hard. I don't want to do that, just because there is so much there that people, want to make this into.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a problem in the Pharisees' day too, right? Jesus accused the Pharisees of leading people astray because they were chasing their own commandments instead of God's commandments. And it's the same today. Sometimes it feels like the noise is bigger because of all, like you referenced those videos earlier. I saw one today that was professing that Jesus was pro-choice. And it just was completely incomprehensible because their point was God has given us free choice, therefore, whatever you want to do. That's not consistent with the Bible, right? God has given us free choice to choose, but there's also a morality that he's given us right and wrong, right? We got to stay focused on the truth and not get distracted by those things. Yeah.
I was just going to make a side comment, like something I'm noticing the more videos I watch on YouTube, like there's a lot of people with good intentions on there, but they don't have like the right basis of faith. Like they, at the end of the video, they'll say, I always give my viewers a chance to come to Christ. Here's all you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Say this prayer, profess that Jesus is Lord with your mouth, and you're saved. And it's like, no.
Right. You, again.
I think we just need to, like, it can come across really subtle, but we just need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
I think.
Matthew 7, there will be lots of people on that day that say, Lord, Lord, right? They think they're doing right.
Yeah, they do.
It's our job as Christians to point out those out and help those people whenever we can.
Yep.
Yeah. But not be distracted and confused by them. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on this before we move on? Yes.
Or the comfortability. You get so comfortable
Uh-huh.
in your everyday life. Oh, I go to church. I don't read my Bible. Pray, but I'm going to church, so it matters. So I think that doing the same things over and over again and not actually putting that in practice really affects your walk and in terms kills. But everyone thinks that you're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
You're not.
Right. You can look like it on the outside, but inside you're dead, right? We're going to be talking about that a lot tonight. But that's an excellent point. It's very, very easy to grow complacent and comfortable and not worry about growth anymore. Yeah. Okay. Good point. Anybody else? Okay. So let's talk about being lukewarm, okay? Part of, well, as we're talking about being prepared and preparing our lives and our hearts for zeal, that's going to have to start with self-reflection. We got to know where we're at before we can know how to begin, right? We have to look within our own hearts to make sure that it is properly prepared and that it's the good ground. It's not rocky, it's not soil, it's not calloused over, and so the seed can't germinate in the first place. Okay, so that begins with an honest estimation of our own hearts and our level of enthusiasm for God and the things He wants us to do. Okay, so let's go to Revelation 3. I'm going to ask someone to read 14 through 22, please.
And to the angel of the church of Laodiceans write, these things say the Amen, the faithful and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore, be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. To him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Okay,
So this is often one of the first things we think about is that this is the lukewarm church. Who can tell me something about Laodicea, the city itself? This is not in the book. I'm just curious what we know. It was in Asia Minor. Great. Right there, right in the middle of Asia Minor. This is the last city that he spoke to. Okay. What else? It's okay if you don't know. It's okay. I have some things written down.
They were generally wealthy,
They were.
so that comes into play a lot.
Mm-hmm. They were located on a very key trade route throughout the region, right? And so a lot of commercial enterprise came through there. It was a very wealthy city. It had a very large banking center also. Okay, there was an earthquake that came through and destroyed various cities in the area. It hit Philadelphia too. Laodicea, Rome. Okay, I'm going to back up a minute. Rome, because of the empire, offered funds to various cities to help them get back on their feet. Laodicea said, no, we don't want any funds, because they were so wealthy they could rebuild the city by themselves. Okay, they believed themselves to be self-sufficient. Very much what we see in this letter, right? What else?
There's no mention of persecution in Jesus' message to them. So
Mhm.
I think that could be a big factor.
It could. When you think of Christianity that has taken root, there's always persecution somewhere in there, right? But you're right, we don't see anything here. They had a really famous medical center known for ophthalmology. Okay, ISAV, talks about ISAV here. They also had no good water source in their city. Okay, so there was a thermal spring that was located some distance away, and so they had to bring it in through piping and aqueducts to bring it in. By the time it got there, the water was no longer warm. It wasn't cold either. It was kind of lukewarm. It wasn't really comfortable to drink or really good for much of anything. Okay, so when you think of being lukewarm, generally speaking, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Indifferent or complacent,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of half-hearted. Not a lot of, we're talking about zeal, definitely no zeal, just not a lot of energy.
Apathetic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot like what Cassidy was saying. You know,
Mhm.
we do what we feel we need to check a box.
Yep.
And it's kind of the extent of it. So they were obviously going, and there was a church there, so they weren't really being disciples.
Right. They may look like Christians on the outside, but on the inside, there wasn't much substance. Yeah. When you think of lukewarm water, who likes to drink lukewarm water? There are a few people out there. I didn't know that beforehand, but it's good to know. Most people don't, right? We live in the South. It gets really hot in the summertime. Most people aren't going to go get room temperature water and want to drink it, right? Most people. Most people want ice, or at least something cool out of the fridge, right? In the wintertime, last week, it was very, very cold around here. Most people didn't go grab a glass of ice water and drink it. They wanted something warm, coffee, tea, hot chocolate, apple cider, things like that to keep themselves warm. Hot water serves a purpose, and cold water serves a purpose. Lukewarm water doesn't really serve a purpose.
You can drink it quicker.
Yes. For those few people out there. Generally speaking, most people don't prefer it. They're going to gravitate towards one or the other, depending on the situation where they need it, right? What is Jesus' response here to the lukewarmness of them? What does he want to do with them? Spit them out. Okay? The image of Jesus vomiting out this water is a stark image. It's a sign of revulsion towards this water. It's a sign of revulsion towards Christians who are complacent and empty on the outside. They may look productive. They're there at worship assembly, but it hasn't changed them in a way. They're not fully grown plants. They're not mature, right? And so we should definitely take him seriously. This image of spewing out is not isolated to this passage. Luke 18, 24 through 28. Moses is giving, God, through Moses, is giving warnings to the people as they prepare to go into the land. Do not defile yourselves with any of these things, for by all these things the nations are defiled, which I am casting out before you. Okay? And he goes down to, he tells them to keep my statutes and my judgments, do not commit any abominations. And then he goes down and says that if you do these things, the land will vomit you out, also when you defile it, as it vomited out the nations that were before you. God's stance towards sin and a lack of faithfulness of his people should be a reminder to us of how we should also view sin and a lack of complacency. Anytime we see God have a reaction towards something, we should have a similar reaction as his children, right? So if God views sin and complacency and lack of growth in this way, we should have the same reaction when we see it in ourselves too. Comments, questions? Yeah.
In Revelation 3, it's interesting that the phrase, in verse 18, he counsels them to buy white garments so that you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen. That language is interesting because it's like Garden of Eden language. You go back and, Adam and Eve, they sin, they realize they're naked, they try to solve the problem themselves. It's insufficient. God solves the problem. He clothes them. It's kind of the same language here. God sees the nakedness. He sees the exposure of their shame. They need to come back to God who's going to clothe them. And that's Hebrews 4 language. Like the word of God, it'll leave us exposed. And so the lukewarmness shows the relationship with the word. They were ignorant of the word and didn't realize their shameful existence. And so that's like the counterbalance here. It's like, get in the word, come back to God, the source of the zeal. He'll make you hot again. He'll clothe you. He'll cover that shame. We have to remember our condition without God is really kind of, I think, the lesson he's, trying to instruct them on there in verse 18.
Yeah, for sure. He's the source. Come to me. Let me help you get back to where you need to be. Yeah, excellent. Anybody else? Riley.
I think it's interesting that they were rich or wealthy, just because even in our culture, like, you can see a reliance on self and on like our physical things so much, and we also don't kind of suffering that other places do, and so I think sometimes like it's like, yeah, I want to go to heaven, but like I also enjoy life here, and I mean it's a blessing to enjoy life here, but we don't have that same like, man, like I'm longing for something better all the time that
Right.
places like maybe India or wherever might have a little bit more, and so we kind of lose that focus occasionally. And it's not that we can't have it, and again, like it's a blessing to be able to live the way that we live, but we just need to remember like this still isn't our home.
Right. It's very easy to grow complacent and comfortable and not to think about those things. Our standard of living in this country and our life expectancy and our access to medicine and all those sorts of things means it's easier to avoid suffering and health crises and early premature death and those sorts of things. It still happens, but not to the majority. We got to remember where we belong and strive for that, regardless of when it comes. Anybody else? Okay, so let's talk about practicality. Oh, did I see a hand? No, okay. So let's talk about practicality for a minute. And really, this is where I'm going to kind of live for the rest of our time tonight. If you think of a lukewarm Christian, what characteristics, what behaviors do you see in this type of individual? Not in an effort to shame anybody, but certainly so we can learn and grow together. Okay? What does this look like?
Like a bare minimum of service, right? So they might show up on Sunday. They might even do more or less most Wednesdays, unless there's something better going on.
Mm-hmm.
But any kind of like the extracurricular kind of things that happen during the week, we might do together, put together anything. It's just not going to happen. Probably don't even really volunteer for much that's like visible in service too. You know, that kind of thing. It's going to be the most obvious in service and how we worship, because this is where we spend the most time around each other, right? So
Yeah.
you don't get to see things that you might witness in your home in a lukewarm Christian, in your spouse or in your child or somebody, right? Where you spend more time around them and you can see the lack of any kind of relationship with God or fruits that would come from that, right? So, and just thinking about where you're most likely going to see it, it would be there, right? Just in a general, like just apathy towards service. But not only that, also I think it also tends to manifest in harshness towards those who are zealous about the service,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're more likely to say disparaging things about the way service is done, or some people that are, you know, he's just going hard for the Lord, and it's a kind of just a negative connotation of how they speak about people who are engaged more in trying to serve God.
Yeah, you see, there's this thought process in the world, and it has been there for a very long time, but I feel like it's become much pronounced in the last 2 or 3 decades, right? Of if you are zealous for anything religion focused, like you're a weirdo, you're too radical, you shouldn't be like this, right? And I think my concern is that has pushed some of us to push it back a little bit in ways that maybe we shouldn't, right? You mentioned the services. They're here. They're here. Sundays, sometimes Wednesdays. Gospel meetings, maybe not quite so much. But I would question, though, when they're here, are their hearts engaged? Or maybe they're singing the songs, but they're thinking about something else. Or they're maybe or maybe not listening to the sermon or following along. And I thought about, as you were talking, in Amos 5, where God says he rejected the offerings of the people because they were not engaged. Their hearts weren't in it. They were just offering it because they had to offer it, not because they cared, right? And so a lot of times that's what I was thinking of when you were talking about that. Yeah. Kendall, did I see your hand next?
Sister Joanna said the other day, which I never heard before, a pew warmer.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think there's ways that you can see physically and spiritually the differences. I think sometimes physically not being hospitable probably to one another. In correlation to Hebrews 4, it's hard to edify people you don't know. So
Absolutely.
that doesn't always mean inviting them to your house. It could just mean inviting them over and like sharing a meal together wherever, or inviting them to do something. So something like that.
Yeah, we've all seen people who come into services late and leave services a little early, or maybe as soon as it's over, and don't really form those connections. We're supposed to be a body knit together. That means we have to work together, and it's really hard to do that if you don't form those relationships. And it's very disheartening when you see those people start to fall away and they're coming less frequently, but you can't reach them because they're not there enough to really form a relationship with. Yeah.
Something Paul said, I think the defensiveness is one of the keys. Like, when there's, how about I word it this way? When I've been in periods of life where it's like, not as zealous, not as hot,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, if you're going to then come to me and call something out that I'm doing, I'm going to be a lot more defensive of myself and what I've decided to do. So I think that's, one thing. When defensiveness starts to creep up, there's
Sure.
probably an issue. But number two, the acts of service he was talking about got me thinking too. Lord, Lord, did we not?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that kind of comes into play, that they will do some of the things, but it was kind of how you concluded that. It's like their motivation for doing it becomes, I'm doing this, there's some selfish reason. It's not about genuine love and concern for others. It's for self. And I mean, that could appear in a number of ways, but I think we all know kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. If they're doing something, it's because usually there might be an ulterior motive, right? Or if they're doing something, often it's because that's a close relationship they formed. They're not doing something for the stranger. They're not going out of their way to do something, right? I think about, I talk about this story a lot in classes, and I'm not sure if I talked about it in here. In 2 Samuel 24, where David has done the census. Have we talked about this in this class? No. David is doing the census, and God becomes angry because he's numbering the people. It was not something he was instructed to do. So God gives him some choices on punishment. David turns it back to God and says, you choose. And so the plague comes through, and a number of people are killed. And the prophet, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the prophet's name. He comes and says, David, you need to offer a sacrifice. Go to this threshing floor and go. Oh, I had his name somewhere. Aruna, go to his threshing floor and offer a sacrifice at this place. And David goes there, and the guy says, here, I'm going to give you the wood. I'm going to give you the stone. I'm going to give you the animals. And David's response in verse 24 is, no, I will surely buy it from you for a price, nor will I offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God, which has cost me nothing. David understood that service to God has to cost something. It can be money, it can be time, it can be effort, it can be, not doing something else you'd rather be doing. But service to God requires effort and work on our part. And when you think of a lukewarm Christian who's not serving other people or not serving a stranger or whoever they're coming in contact with, the effort isn't there. And it's noticeable, right? You can see there's opportunities we have to go worship, to go serve. Who's taking advantage of those opportunities? Not everyone can do it every single time. That is not what I'm saying. But if you never take advantage of the opportunities, why? God expects us to serve and to sacrifice for him. Are we giving those sacrifices?
Well, that's kind of the end of that. When did we see?
Uh-huh.
It's like if we're just waiting for the opportunity to fall in our lap, it'll never come.
Right.
We have to be proactive in it. So that's kind of to that, when we find ourselves waiting,
Mm-hmm.
we're missing the opportunities.
Right. There's always something to do, right? Galatians 6:10, let us do good to all. It's not just those people that we bump into on the way into services or out of services. It's everybody. No one's left out. Look for those opportunities because they're there. Yeah.
I was to your point about like people missing and whatnot. An old elder told me once in a while that quote, people are like old cars, they sputter before they miss and they miss before they quit. So it's always sometimes it's an effort that they're not taking advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah. Usually that's one of the first steps towards complacency. You stop trying. You stop doing. Yeah. We got to be doers, not just hearers. Yeah. Okay. What else?
Well, they say that, whoever calls my name, Lord, Lord, all that stuff, and it's the point where it says, oh goodness, I'm blanking. When did we see you when you were naked? When did
Yes.
we see you when you were hungry? And he said, I gave you plenty of opportunities and you did nothing.
Yeah.
Depart from me, I never knew you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of sticks in my head a little bit.
Yeah. Jesus came to serve, right? If we're going to be in his kingdom, we have to be a citizen of his kingdom and serve like he did. Yeah. Nikki.
Whether or not we can see it, it might be them making poor choices in their own lives,
Mhm.
personally. Just the things that they're doing, the things that they're willing to look at or engage in, the people that they're willing to, speak to. There's a lot that we have to be on guard of if we are, aiming to be true Christians, and there's a lot we have to abandon, and then slowly those things will start to come back. They let down the guard, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is not right. I can watch this on TV.
Mhm.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I can be out with this person. I can go to this place, and you see those things slowly leak in, and that lowers their defenses even more.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, and it's like he was saying, a car that sputters. I heard it's like a piece of something drifting out to sea. It's
Oh, yes.
very slow, and you don't always know when it's happening. But then all of a sudden, they're miles and miles out from the shore, and it's like, well, when did this all happen? It's slowly but surely.
It is. We lived in Galveston for several years, and I distinctly remember driving home from school one day along the seawall, and the helicopters were over the beach because they were looking for someone who thought they were secure in the water, and they drifted just a little too far, and they were gone. You never know where that point is. Don't even get out there where the danger is. Stay in the safety of Christ. Yeah.
I've really come to not like the gray area conversations because of that. It's like, this has been on my mind for a sermon, but it's like when we think about drunkenness,
Mm-hmm.
we're like, okay, drunkenness is a sin, sobriety is not. But we're not satisfied with that conversation. Is it one drink? Is it, we want to define that, and it's kind of like, why? Why do we even want to test the limits? And I think that's definitely, the lukewarmness, when we start focusing on, the gray areas, we find ourselves generally doing that because we want to toe the line.
Yes. I think about, you mentioned drunkenness, I think about modesty. Well, is this too short? Is this too tight? Is it, however you want to describe it. And then it turns into, well, that's just the uniform for X activity. It's okay because it's in this context. Context doesn't change right and wrong, right? When we want to make excuses for our behavior, regardless of what it is, then we are, prideful and ready to fall. Yeah, great. Any other thoughts on what this looks like in practice? Okay, so we've talked about a lot of these things as we went through that I put, God isn't first in their lives, right? They're here on worship services, usually speaking, but Matthew 6:24, you cannot serve two masters. You'll hate one and love the other, or you'll be loyal to one and despise the other. You can't serve God and mammon or wealth, right? God is not first. Something else is. It doesn't have to be money. It can be, right? But it could be the sports schedule that they're wanting to watch. It could be their kids, because their kids have these activities. They're going to compromise God's expectations to serve their family, okay? Kids are not wrong. Their activities are not wrong. But something's getting in their way, right? Set your mind on things above, not on things either, as Colossians 3, verse 2. They make excuses when they can't be here. There's some sort of conflict. When they're here worshiping, they may or may not be active worshiping, right? They may not be engaged. They lean on their own strength. I don't know. There we go. They lean on their own strength rather than Christ. They arrange their lives so they can be comfortable and not put themselves at risk, right? The book referenced the parable of the rich man who built up barns for himself and was expecting to live comfortably on his own means. And his soul was captured from him, judged for that. Galatians 1:10, for do I now persuade men or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I still please men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. If we are living our lives in a way so we don't stand out and we don't draw the eye of the world in a persecution or suffering manner, are we truly serving Christ? Not that we have to seek out opportunities to suffer, but by nature, because we are a servant of Christ, there will be some of that. It is a guarantee. And if we're not suffering, if there's not persecution, are we standing out enough? Or are we fading into the background? Okay. They're hearers of the word only. They're not doers. They're not active in serving or whatever else they're called to do. They do little for their neighbor. Do they see the needs of their neighbor? Or are they so focused on whatever they're living in their lives and what they're doing, instead of the needs of others? They may not even observe those needs, okay? They don't use the resources, their time, or whatever it is. I'm going to catch up with myself here. There we are. They don't take advantage of those opportunities. We've already talked to some about that. The word doesn't produce changes in them. We read story after story after story in the Bible of these people who did good for God in ways that we can mimic and imitate. And yet when some people read them, it doesn't produce that change in them, right? Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run the race that is set before us with endurance, looking unto Jesus. Everyone's cheering us on and showing us that we can do it because they did it. That should be encouraging. That should be inspiring. It should produce change. Let us lay aside those weights. If we're lukewarm, are we laying those weights aside? And then they're silent about their faith. We did talk about that a little bit. They're not really out there evangelizing or speaking or showing their faith in God. They are not a light set on a hill. They've hidden that. They've lost their flavor of salt. Okay. And so when we look at a list like this, does this describe us? Maybe not all of them, but some of them, sometimes. I think all of us at some point in our lives have done something here. Okay, if we're being completely honest. We need to root those things out. Remove those thorns, remove those stones, so that we have room to grow like God wants us to do. Okay. Thoughts or questions? The bell's going to ring in about 30 seconds. Braden.
I think one of the first things to go is prayer.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy who, had committed adultery on his wife. They reconciled their marriage, and he preached a sermon after that, and it was all about prayer. And he said, that was like the gateway. I lost touch with God, and it.
Mm-hmm.
So God isn't first. I think
No.
prayer is kind of and nobody else can judge that. That's
Right.
for us.
How many times do we see Jesus going aside to pray because his relationship with the Father was the key relationship in his life. Is it ours? Yeah, great thoughts. Thank you all. Great conversations tonight. We'll pick it up in the next lesson next week.